November data is out. It's good and bad this month. Let's take a look at what's happening in the real estate market in GTA and how does 2025 look from here. Everyone in and here. Everybody has been looking forward to the November data because it sets the tone for the remainder of this year and it will show us the likelihood if we are going to have a strong spring market in 2025. And based on November data, we can start to see some clues. Let's take a look at the screen. This is basically a quick summary of what we see in November. And right off the bat, the biggest piece of good news is we can see a 40% increase in terms of number of sales, which is good. There's more buyers came back to the market, right, comparing to last year. So 5,800 versus last year we had 4,200, right? So more buyers, definitely a good news. And new listings, we can see sellers, not so much. We have had a lot of sellers last year and we had a lot of sellers this year, 11,500, right? But it's not a big gain from last year. So just based on these two numbers, we can see that we should have a better November than the same time last year. In terms of buyer to seller ratios, we had a lot bigger gain on the number of buyers. But the problem is there's still a lot of active listings right now. We have 21,800 active listings, which is a 30% more, right, than the same time last year. So if we discard the number of sellers, okay, we just purely look at the number of buyers and number of active listings. So we've had about 1,600 gain on number of new buyers, but we have about 5,000 more active listings compared to the same time last year. So is the market better? It's hard to say, right? At the same time, there is more activities from the buyer side, but they also have a lot more to choose from. So, every market still behaves quite differently right now, right? So we'll dive into the more specific segments later on. But for now, just keep that in mind, right? We still have a lot more listings to digest, but we do have more buyers. Number of average price didn't really change, okay? So this doesn't really tell us much. Average price is about the same. Based on what I've seen in actual transactions, there are actually quite a number of regions or property types like condo, for example, that are actually selling below last year's price. Okay, it's hard to even get the same price last year. So average price, we are not doing too well either from that front. And in terms of average day on the market, 31 days right now, which is longer than how long it takes to sell a listing same time last year, right? So you can tell the market is still, a bit slow. Okay, in terms of different property types, and we can see that average price-wise, we did have higher gain on the detached homes, right? 3.9 year over year. And condos, we've had drop in average price, which is actually what we see in the market, right? Condos are becoming less favorable as an option for both end users and investors, because for end users, right, everybody has become more accustomed to working from home, and distance to work is no longer as big of an issue, and everybody enjoys having more space. And for investors, because condo fees has gone up quite a bit in the last couple of years because of higher inflation. It used to be 80 cents per square feet was normal, but now like 90, even $1 per square feet becomes more normal, right, in terms of maintenance fee, and that will eat away the cash flow from investors. And because there's a lot of new policies saying, oh, next year we're going to stop renewing the visa for a lot of temporary residents, right? They cannot buy a house anyways, but they are currently renting. So if we're stopping renew their visa for, let's say, 700,000 people, then there's going to be some kind of challenge in the rental market, right? So which further eats away investors' cash flow goals, right? So for condos, it's going to be a bit challenging. And on the pre-construction market, we've sold about 80% less units, right, comparing to like average volume. So pre-construction is the best sort of tell sign for how motivated the investors are, right? If investors are not motivated, then nobody buying pre-constructions, because the percentage of people who buy pre-construction as an end user is smaller than resale market. But I mean, condos do have a good price from a resale perspective right now, which is why you can also see a 36% gain in the number of sales year over year, right? We did have more condo buyer this year in November than last year. Not as big as the average, like 40%, and not as much as the 44% for detached. But condos are still, we have more buyers, right? Because it's still the cheapest option. $500,000, you can buy a one bedroom in downtown Toronto right now, right? Not every building, but some buildings are starting to have very affordable options. Comparing to like 2 years ago, you probably would cost you about 600,000 even just to start buying a home. Now its starting price is about 500,000, right? You can see there's a price difference. So there's still some buyers returning to the condo market, but comparing to the inventory level, I'm pretty sure it's still quite a challenging market. So let's take a look at the same data. But one note to make, and this message goes to the trend reporting analyst, right? I do think there's a small mistake in this month's data. You can see the Halton region, 625 sales, right? But if you add up the total between the four cities in Halton, it only adds up to 614, right? This does not happen for every other region or every other month of reporting, only this month. where this does not add up to the total, right? Which I think makes the number of sales inflated by 11 transactions. Okay, just something for the trap analyst to take a look. And that's why if you don't see the exact matching numbers in my report, don't be surprised. Okay, now let's make the number of sales into a graphical format. And this on the screen is basically the past 9 years, okay, for number of sales. And we can see that the total for November is right here. This includes all the property types, right? We have had the sales level is higher than the past 2 years. 2022 and 23 were lower in terms of number of sales, right? Which is understandable because the last 2 years we've had a very slow second half of the year, right? This year we've had a similar level of slow second half of the year in, let's say, June, July, August, September, right? We have pretty slow market. But October and November, ever since our rates started to cut, like for real, right? Now, October, we had a 50 basis point drop in our rates. We are starting to see more activities pushing up the number of sales. So it's a good sign. We're starting to return to a normal year level in terms of number of buyers. You can see every other year, we've had higher number of sales, right? During the October and November. And the November drop is very seasonal, right? So every year we have a less busy November than October, except 1 year. 2017, we've had a busier November than October. That's the only exception, right? Every other year, November, it's slower. So like our current drop makes sense, but it still shows we're doing well in terms of number of buyers. And next month, we are expected to have less buyer too, right? So I expect us to drop down to about 4,000 sales level in December, just following every other year's seasonality, because Christmas everybody slows down a bit. But which I'll tell you why Christmas, it might not be a bad time to sell your property in just a little bit. Okay, I'll tell you the reason why. Regardless, there's less buyers in December. And in terms of number of sellers, okay, we're currently here. This is the past 9 years of data. We're at here. Okay, so we're definitely one of the higher years in terms of number of sellers. 2017 November had the highest number of sellers. Okay, at 14,000. We're at 11,000, okay? We're still lower, but we're still higher than most other years. So we're okay. Like in terms of number of sellers, we're not doing too bad. We're still in the ballpark. We're one of the higher years, but not the highest. And we do expect to have a pretty significant drop in terms of number of sellers next month as well, because Christmas season, most people don't want to show their home, right? For buyer visits. They'd rather take their listings off the market or go on the market next year. Most homeowners, they take a lot of pride in their landscaping. They want to showcase the beautiful front and backyards. They want to wait until the spring, right? Like March, April, May to really showcase their home. They don't want to show their home when the snow is falling. So we're expected to have less sellers in the next few months. And in terms of the active listings, okay, so we can see that currently we are at 21,000, which we saw earlier in the summary. And this basically shows us that we're still at a historically high level of active listing. And this is what worries me the most, okay, for whether we're going to have a strong spring market, because we were hoping that November would have had a bigger drop, okay? Because we've had a strong October sales. Like the October sales shot up. We saw that chart, right? And November, we had a strong number of sales too. So I was hoping that we can have a bigger drop in active listings in November to bring it closer back to normal level so we can bring our active listings down to a regular level. But right now it seems like, yes, we've had a drop in November, but we're still following the seasonality quite closely. And the only 2 other years that had a less drop in active listings was 2017, which is here, and 2022, which is here, right? You can see that these 2 years, the active listings, they didn't drop down as much. And these were the 2 of the worst years, right? In terms of real estate in the second half of the year, right? They both had a very strong first half of the year. 2017, remember the peak in price was March 2017, and the peak in our recent real estate frenzy was the February of 2022, right? They both had a really crazy beginning of the year, and then the market really tanked afterwards. So we can see that they had a very challenging October to November. But aside from these 2, every other year, the drop is pretty significant, right? In terms of active listings. And our current drop is actually quite normal in terms of the seasonality on how it drops. And if it follows this trend, we're going to have a December that looks like this, which is still a very high level, right? This is still about 16, 17,000. And if we bring it back to the beginning of the year, when we come January, we're going to have 16, 17,000 active listings to start our new year. And every year, the spring market between January and February, it's strong because we have very low active listings, okay? And when the buyers come out in the January and February, and they have very few selections to choose from, then bidding war starts. Market start to behave a bit more busy, right? But if we still have a lot of listings, then, the spring market, the hotness of the spring market will likely be tempered, right, by the number of active listings. So this is the part I'm a bit worried about. But I do think we'll still have a busy spring market between the last week of December, end of March. It's because we've seen this chart. This is to sales to new listing ratio, right? The ratio between buyer to sellers. And right now we're here. And we have been consistently improving, right? So we're actually having more improvement on buyers and slower increase on sellers. So it's a good sign, right? For existing market listings, as long as we keep up this trend, and you price your property correctly, in December, there is going to be this off balance, between number of buyers and sellers, which will further eat away our active listings and get it ready for a hot January and February market, right? So I do think we still have a busy early spring market. But I would say if you have a property to sell, right, make sure you are on the market between last week of December to at least the end of February or end of March, right? Because if you take a look at the number of buyers, the history, we can see that typically the highest peak of buyers comes in March. But there's a consistent increase, okay, of number of buyers in January and February. Okay, so the first 3 months of the year is where a lot of the buyers transacting. And then it typically sort of, depending on the year, right, it sort of slows down a bit afterwards. So you don't want to miss this frenzy of buyers, especially when they're increasing every month. Like later on in the year, it sort of stabilized, right? But beginning of the year, they come out more and more and more. And buyers, they see, oh, others are, getting bidding wars and I plan to buy a house. Maybe they plan to come out later in the year, but they see that the price is going up, jump in, right? There's like a FOMO feeling almost every year at the beginning of the year. So you want to make sure your property is on the market between end of December to end of March to capture this wave of buyers. And the reason I say end of December is because that's actually when you have the least amount of choice, right, for buyers, because everybody's took their listing off during Christmas. So when these buyers come out, like I personally had a number of very difficult to sell listings, like condos, cottages, like very expensive homes last year, the last week of December. All of a sudden, we've had a number of good offers that came in, and we sold a number of hard to sell listings just between the last week of December and the first 2 weeks of January this year, right? So you want to make sure your property is on there, because when I think back, if I did not list those properties and I listed those properties later on in the year, they're probably still on the market. We still could not find similar properties sort of for the similar price comparing to what we sold during that time. You can see new listings. A lot of the sellers, they really start to come out of the market in March. Okay, January, February, new listings are very few, right, in terms of volume. Because we see that market start to heat up in January and February. A lot of the sellers, they be like, oh, market is hot. I plan to sell. So let's put on the market quickly. So usually March is when they can get their property ready after they start to see that frenzy. And that's why a lot of times March, depending on the year, it could be a really good month or starting to taper off, right? There's still some residual heat from January, February into March. But because you have more sellers competing for that group of buyers, your individual listing, the chance of succeeding actually start to decrease in March and April. And that's when a lot of the new policies actually comes out, right? We've had, like, say, foreign buyer tax, or like some of those restrictions and, new mortgage rules. Like a lot of them actually comes out in the spring. So these new policies, sometimes they have a major impact on the real estate market. So that cools down the market after May and June, right? So if you look at the number of history in the past few years, like a lot of it has repeated, right? January, February, March, strong market. April, something happens. May, June, start to taper off, right? And if you take a look at the average price as well, it follows about the same trend. You can see that every year, January, February typically have the biggest increase, okay, biggest jump in terms of average price. The reason that it has a jump in the data is because every transaction is selling for a higher price than their neighbor sold last month. That's how you see a jump in data. If they sold for the same price, the data would be flat. So that's where you can see like January, February probably is the most amount of bidding war going on and pushing up the price further higher. And after April, you can see that a lot of it starts to come down, right? In May and June, it's like generally a downwards trend in majority of the years. So that's when you miss that spring market. So if you have a property to sell, make sure you capture January, February, and March. Even if you don't want to do a bidding war, and let's say your expectation is higher than where the market can absorb today, and you're thinking of taking it off the market, don't, right? Just make sure that you capture the exposure from the spring market. Even if your expectation is higher, just keep it in the market, and you never know, you may get a nice surprise during these 2 months when there's not a lot of competition from other sellers, and maybe just one buyer really likes your property, and you can make a deal during this time of lesser inventory level, okay? So just wanted to share on a very high level the GTA real estate market trend, right, for this month, and we're going to dive further into to the different property types in future videos. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, and see you next time.